Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast Show. You are listening to the first and only podcast dedicated to the business of pharmacy. Be sure to subscribe to the show via iTunes and leave us a voice comment from our contact section on the website. You can find all of our episodes at pharmacypodcast.com.
Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast. I'm your co-host in 2017, focused on your career development, Erin Albert. More on me over at my website, erinalbert.com. Today, I want to focus on a conference that I just had the opportunity and extreme pleasure to be part of as a speaker and mentor, and that is South by Southwest. I got a couple of shout outs on Twitter that some of you wanted a recap of this experience, and truly this was not a conference, this was an experience in Austin, Texas. It is a very long festival that's been around since the late 1980s. And so today I wanted to give you a full recap of the very short period of time I was at this conference to share with you from a career development perspective what I learned at this conference, both as a participant and as a speaker. Okay, South by Southwest. This was again a conference that was started in the late 1980s, and it started predominantly as a music festival. And in show notes for this podcast, I'll link up all the wonderful resources that I used to learn about this festival, because honestly, in 2017, this was the first year I had the opportunity to attend this festival myself. And so it's a festival that has several sub-festivals within it, if that makes sense. So the first festival that launches with the South by Southwest name is South by Southwest EDU, and that conference kicked off on March 6th of this year. And then the 10th through the 18th was South by Southwest. And within South by Southwest, they have several subtypes of conferences. So film, musical, interactive, and just general South by Southwest with other categories. So this is a conference really for a lot of all comers. There are topics around things like health, government, sports, journalism, social impact, coding, design, marketing. I mean, you name it, and they probably have a track for it. That was one of the most interesting pieces as to why South by Southwest was always a bucket list item for me, not only to attend, but to speak as well. And that's because they have a lot of attendees who are multi-patient, just like myself and a lot of other folks that I've talked to out there. And I discovered that this conference definitely attracts those types of professionals. So I was comforted by being around my peeps, so to speak. The speakers this year included various folks, rock stars across industries that I follow. Of course, the big keynote this year was former Vice President Joe Biden. He was there to talk about Cancer Moonshot and that initiative. Of course, Tim Ferriss, James Altucher, Gary Vaynerchuk, Cory Booker, Cecile Richards, Adam Grant, who is the author of my favorite book from 2016, Originals, and Jenny Blake of the book Pivot. And I'll talk a little bit more about her book here later on. So that's just a tiny sliver of all the amazing speakers that this event has. And literally you get, when you register, books on all the sessions that are going on, when the sub-sessions are happening. And again, I was only there for a very thin slice of the conference that focused on South by Southwest Interactive. And that's where the health topics lied this year for the most part. These tracks, again, are all over the place, and that was one of the big challenges I had in attending this event, was picking which sessions I wanted to go to. As a generalist, I have a lot of interests, so things like gender parity was a theme across different conferences that I really wanted to attend. Entrepreneurship, of course, that covers a lot of different professions. And of course, health, of which I was part of as a mentor this year. They have a lot of different types of events going on. So a lot of organizations will purchase tents or their own space to have different promotions going on or different experiences. In addition to that, there's a lot of education going on. There's panel sessions, at least in health there were. There are book and author meet the author sessions where the first 30 minutes was focused on the author giving a reading or a general summary of his or her book. The second 30 minutes was them going down to the bookstore where you could literally get in line and have them sign your book and take a selfie with them. I thought that was one of the coolest things in this session. I'd love to do that in the future, by the way, if anybody from South by is listening. So I kind of hung out in room 10A and B at the convention center because that's where the books and author sessions were going on. So in addition to the mentoring sessions that I participated in, the book author signings, there were panel discussions, a lot of health topics focused on panel discussions. And then last but not least, the big draw interactive keynotes. So I got to give a shout out in particular to Gary Vaynerchuk, who I thought did a fantastic job in making most of his interactive session completely Q&A by the audience. And I think that is what people really appreciate at these conferences, the interactivity with these key thought leaders. He was very brave in allowing the audience to do that. And I know that's his normal modus operandi, but of all the speakers, I saw him do that the most. So props out to him. Some things I noted in attending South by Southwest for the first time this year. Number one, it's overwhelming. So as you probably already listened to us talk about HIMSS 17, this conference is about the same size. I've heard anywhere between 30 and 35,000 attendees at South by Southwest, whereas HIMSS this year had 42,000 attendees. The differences with South by is that the conference is spread across different hotels downtown, whereas HIMSS is all pretty much focused on one convention center. So all the activities going on at South by Southwest can't fit in this convention center by itself. So they're spread out over the downtown area. The good news about that is most of it's walkable, and they do have a shuttle that takes people around as well. I guess the kind of challenge there was that Austin doesn't have the traditional Uber and Lyft ride-sharing services, but they do have some local options. And the official ride-share option was a company called Fasten. And I used Fasten, and I found it pretty helpful. So I guess my best piece of advice is if you do go to this conference in the future, you definitely want to have a plan before you go, much like HIMSS. South by Southwest has an app, and we'll talk a little bit more about the interactivity of the app itself, but it definitely allows you to scroll through all the topics and favorite the ones that you really want to focus on while you're at the conference itself. That also helps the app set up people in common or people that have tags in common with your common interests in terms of networking, and we'll get into that in a minute here as well. The other thing you have to get in the right mindset for when you attend South by is to prepare to stand in line. And pretty much every session I queued up for, I had to wait in a line to get into. Now, their remedy for this, I think, is kind of a clever one that they tried this year, where they attempted to have different badge levels. So the highest badge level being platinum, where you could get into every session kind of first in line, if you will, or they had two different queues, one for the platinum badge and then one for everybody else. The platinum badge allegedly would get into the room first. When you're going to see somebody like a Tim Ferriss or, Vice President Joe Biden, you're always going to have queues. So at least with South by Southwest, if you're willing to pony up a little bit more money for your registration, you might be able to get further to the closer part of the line to get into the room. Another thing to consider is that Austin's prices go up pretty steeply during South by Southwest. So if you are going to commit to attending or participating in this event, the earlier that you can register your hotel, airfare, all of that good stuff, the better off you're going to be. I generally tried to plan ahead to get my airfare and hotel settled. However, the prices did definitely go up. And then prepare to learn. And again, you got to get over the overwhelmingness of it and get on to learning. So they do give you a little canvas tote with all the books in it about all the sessions. However, your best bet is to just take an old-fashioned, I took my Moleskine notebook, my good old Moleskine, and took notes with that. They put you very tightly into the room, so you don't have a lot of room to move around, but it's really important, I think, to capture whatever it is that you're learning in the session, because you don't want the overwhelmingness of the conference itself allowing you to forget all the great bits of information that you're getting. So with that, I'd like to move on to the sessions that I attended and what I learned. And again, I was only there for about 48 hours of this 2-week plus festival. So it's important to keep in mind that what I saw was a tiny fraction of everything that was going on at South by Southwest. But I wanted to share with you some of the sessions, some of the authors in particular. Like I said, room 10A and B was kind of my anchor point at the convention center. The Friday and Saturday I was there because that's where the author sessions were going on. And so some of the author sessions that I saw were Amy Gallo, who wrote a book called Office Politics, and that one recently came out. It really dealt with conflict management, what your style of conflict management is or was, and how to deal with that in the workplace. I like that she polled the audience and had them kind of interacting with the session. There are different types of conflict, people who love to embrace conflict and those who kind of shy away from it. I'm probably of both camps at different points in my career. But nonetheless, it was really interesting to hear her perspectives on conflict at work. The second book that I heard an author that was probably my favorite of the entire author sessions was Jenny Blake, and she wrote a book called Pivot. I did hear about this book prior to South by, so I definitely wanted to pop in and see her live and in action, and she did a phenomenal job. I loved that she talked about the fact that the way that we are working in this country is radically changing. So if you don't know about Jenny, you can Google her, but she basically was a Googler for 5 years. She worked at Google, and she left to go launch her book, and pretty much everybody thought she was crazy for doing that, even her own mother. But what I loved most about her was twofold. Number one, she said, hey, the way that your parents worked in this country is not the way that you will work. And I love that about, her message, because it's true. Those of us with side hustles, in addition to our day jobs, be them entrepreneurial or not, all the people at this particular conference were on board with that. And for her to, proselytize that it's okay to approach your career as a portfolio, I thought was very encouraging. The other thing that she mentioned that I thought was really important was you cannot plan out 5 years from now. It is just too long a metric, and will pair out so many options that will come your way within the next 5 years that to focus that far out is a little bit overbearing at this point. And so I appreciated that comment as well. I personally hate the 5-year question because I just think it's way too crystal ball in this very volatile world that we're living in. So I was encouraged by that as well. She was basically saying to a very packed room, planning out no more than 2 years out, I think is unreasonable at this point. Beyond, those 2 years. So I love that story that she shared around that. The other books that were in the room that I either engaged in or saw part of were Atlas Obscura. So that's the new book on kind of all these odd places that you can visit on the planet. I gave that book away actually as a Christmas gift to a couple of my friends, although I personally haven't read it. I found that session very interesting. Another book on affordable healthcare in America by Dr. Josh Luke. That session started a little late, but he had some interesting things to say about his perspectives in healthcare and where he thinks we're headed in this country with affordable healthcare. And then probably my second favorite book session that I attended was How to Think Like a Futurist, and that was by Amy Webb. And the title of her book is called The Signals Are Talking. And this was actually a book I checked out from the library a while ago, and I need to go back and re-review. But she really talked about how literally to think like a futurist. She considers herself a futurist. She teaches in futurism, if that's a word or not, I don't know. But she was very focused on looking at data and making meaning from the data to try to forecast ahead as to what the future of whatever industry she's studying looks like. So a packed room with her session. I thought her talk was really insightful as well. I think for those of us that are obsessed with the future, I think my personal takeaway is I need to re-review her book so I can get better at being a futurist myself. Those were the author sessions. Now, on to panels and healthcare. I only attended a few. The first was called Hacking Your Health, Future or Fail. And that was about hackathons being used in healthcare and life sciences in order to push forward innovation. While I didn't really hear any exciting examples, I love the concept of the hackathon in healthcare. I think where the opportunity lies is that interprofessional healthcare item that's all showing up now on med school, pharmacy school, and other allied healthcare professionals standards when it comes to education, and that we all need to get better at being interprofessional educators and working on interprofessional teams. So hackathons, I think, definitely have a place. I think it lies at this intersection between maybe informatics, the healthcare professions, business. So if you can get those types of diverse students in a room together working on a hackathon or a project or solving a really big problem in healthcare, I think there's value definitely in looking at the hackathon model for healthcare education. The other session that I went to that was kind of a happy accident was music, pharmacogenomics, AI, and personalized medicine. And it wasn't really that title, but it was about a patient. His name is Bryce Olson. He works for Intel. And he kind of started the session off by talking about his music and how he used music as his therapy when he was a cancer patient. He had advanced prostate cancer. But what really caught me about his story, and again, it was a happy accident that I was in the room because that particular session was changed, was that he talked about genetic sequencing, pharmacogenomics, specialized medicine, and how that whole process basically saved him because the standard of care for prostate cancer wasn't working for him. So he had his genetic sequence done, and he enrolled in a clinical trial for a specific type of chemo that would address his specific type of protein anomaly within his genetic code. So I loved this story. In fact, I've linked it up in Facebook. I will link his story up in the show notes as well, because I think this, in his case, is one of the perfect shining examples of the future of healthcare. It can't be standard of care for each and every patient, particularly in oncology, because cancer is hundreds of different diseases. It's not just one. And then within that, every disease type of cancer has different anomalies genetically for each patient. So we definitely need, in this era of value-based medicine, personalized medicine as well. So when we're throwing chemotherapy at these patients, they're getting the best care that they can for whatever types of specific cancers they have based upon their personal genetics. So I love that story. Bryce Olson, again, check him out. One of my other general favorite things about this conference, and I've already alluded to this before, was the network and the people who attended this conference and participated in it. The app, let's go back to the app. The South by Southwest app was great in that once you chose your favorite topics, interests, keywords, it would actually match you up or suggest people for you to meet at the conference who had things similar to you. So, for example, STEM was one of mine, healthcare, obviously, crowdfunding. And so when I went into the networking portion of the app, it brought up people that had common interests with me. So I love that. Also, within the networking part of the app, there was a beacon technology that would allow you to see who was around you in the room that you were in at the time, which I thought was really cool. Kind of a great way to reduce the overwhelmingness of the 35,000 attendees there. It makes it a little more intimate. And, the old school conversations one-on-one with other attendees, I love that many of them had side hustles. Some of them were in healthcare, and they still had a very different side hustle that landed them at South by Southwest, myself included in that. So everybody there from around the world was there for radically different reasons. But at the end of the day, we all kind of had a very similar mindset in that we were all kind of managing a portfolio of careers, not just one thing. So the tribe within South by, I thought, was amazing. And so if you need to get around more people like that, if that's your energy, if that's your mojo, I would highly recommend South by Southwest for you. So some other key takeaways from various different sessions that I attended. Number one, there's a lot of digital storytelling going on across industries. Obviously, film is a huge part of South by Southwest. However, I attended a Vimeo Picks of the Week panel session with folks from Vimeo. When they picked their favorite videos, they kind of explained and showed some of their picks and why they picked them. I think in healthcare, especially these days, we have to become better storytellers because that's what's going to help our patients in the future. It's not just about this is drug XYZ and you take it 3 times a day. It's about why you're taking it, why it's important to you, and how it can frame up better health for you. And healthcare communication overall is something I think we don't get enough of in the healthcare profession schools. Good old-fashioned Gary Vaynerchuk. If you know him, you know he has unvarnished language. I guess that's the best way to call it. He swears a lot, candidly. And, one of his favorite shticks is focusing on your own stuff. And I've substituted the word stuff for another word that I can't use on this clean podcast. But he's right in the point that we all need to focus on our own stuff. I think it's super important that we not compare ourselves to each other in this era of differentiation and personalization. It's not fair to do that to yourself professionally. So I love that he came out and said that. And again, I loved his session in that he really interacted with the audience. That was what he was there to do. So props, Gary. Number 2, or 3, focus on 1 to 2 years out, not 5 years. Don't have that huge life plan. Per Jenny Blake, I love that. I think the world is just changing too fast now. So her book has a methodology for being agile or flexible in your career and how to experiment around it. Try small steps to get to big steps. I recommend picking up a copy of that book if you're kind of trying to make a change in your career, but you don't want to make it radically overnight. Another note for myself is to read the book Blue Zones. That was mentioned in one of the panel sessions. Blue Zones is a book about literally they went around the world and studied cultures and people who live longer. So what were the elements of longevity in living a good life? I need to re-review that book myself. One of the pediatricians who was in the audience of one of the healthcare panels said this, not me, but I almost wanted to get up with my cheerleading pom-poms and rah-rah him. But basically he said or suggested to one of the panels that we really need to have all allied healthcare professions included in the conversations in panel sessions. And in this particular panel session, there were 2 or 3 physicians and actually 2 physicians and 2 people not in the healthcare professions per se. So I loved that he had the gumption to say this, and I could not agree with him more. In this era of interprofessional education, we need to include pharmacists, social workers, occupational therapists, physical therapists, PAs, NPs, mid-levels. We need to have everyone in on the conversation around healthcare. It cannot just be physicians anymore. And then, overall, I really loved this conference, and for so many reasons, plus so many more. And there was so much left on the table that I didn't get to see. Items like Flat Stock, where they have posters by artists that you can buy locally. Or this year, they tried a local pop-up shop that happened in tandem with Flat Stock. And Flat Stock happened later on in the week after I was already gone from South by Southwest. There were tons of meetup sessions across different hotels that I just physically couldn't get to. And that was one of my hardest struggles, I think, with this entire event, was there were multiple conferences going on at the same time, multiple events in multiple venues, that if I could split myself in 2 or 3 and attend all of them, I definitely would have. So as I mentioned at the top of the show, it's really important to have a plan prior to going to South by, so you know exactly where you're going for the most part, and you know what you need to focus on, because it's otherwise just going to be hugely overwhelming to you. So I hope that helped. I hope, if South by Southwest is you as a healthcare professional or someone that listens to this podcast regularly, if this is a bucket list item for you, I would strongly encourage you to get there. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, it can be a struggle to get there, and we all have lots of different conference options moving forward, particularly in healthcare and life sciences. However, the last thing that one of the panelists said was that South by Southwest was very committed to having more in healthcare and health moving forward for South by 18 and beyond. So I was very encouraged by that. I hope I have the opportunity to return personally to South by Southwest. And most of all, I hope that this little journey that I went on and shared with you was helpful to you. I'd love to hear from you via Twitter if you thought it was. If you have other questions about South by Southwest, I'd be happy to address them with you if I can find the answers. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for letting me know as an audience that this was something of interest to you. And I think if for no other reason, career development is definitely a topic that has a common theme throughout all of South by Southwest. So take care, and until next time, I'm Erin Albert. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Pharmacy Podcast. This episode was brought to you by my new book, The She, He Says Guide to Mentoring. With one of my own mentors, Dr. David Horst, he and she provide insights on how to set up mentoring programs for women and provide general insights on how you can get your own board of advisors. Log on to erinalbert.com/books and you'll find it for sale there.